Welcome back to Sunday Morning Cafe, where the ongoing conversation has been about resilience, what builds it, what grows it. And here lately, we've been talking about relationship resilience. Last time we got together, we talked about resilience in the empty nest phase of the marriage and family life cycle. What builds resilience there? What builds friendship there? What makes more fun happen there? This week, I'd like to stretch all the way over to the other side of the marriage and family life cycle, to the very beginning of a family, which is a couple coming together, either preparing to be married or newly married without any kids. That little stretch of time right there. It's easy to think about that time retrospectively as if that's just one prolonged date, and it's not a very consequential part of the relationship. But the seminal research that came from Betty Carter and Monica McGoldrick, who did the research and put together the concept of the family life cycle phases, would say that those family life cycle phases build one on top of the other. And so this very first phase is actually foundational to all the rest of those phases. And so I'd like to give you an invitation. See if you can find someone who is preparing for marriage or is newly married without kids. Share this video with them. But even if you're not in that phase yourself, again, this is a foundational phase. See if you can't find something for yourself in this video that applies to your marriage in later phases of the family life cycle. All right, so what is going on in this foundational phase of marriage, newly forming couple? Well, one of the things that's going on is that rules and roles are beginning just in their seed form to get defined, and mostly that'll go on unconsciously. The trick is for this phase, and really every phase of marriage, is to make the unconscious conscious, so you know what you're buying into. If you don't make the unconscious conscious, then what we'll tend to do is we'll just replicate those patterns that came from our own childhoods. And the difficulty with that, and if you come from a great family, you might think, well, that's great, except that even if you came from a great family where things went well, every marriage to some extent is a cross-cultural experiment. And by that, I don't mean like a biracial couple. I mean every couple is a cross-cultural experiment. The person you're marrying comes from a different family of origin with different experiences, different rituals, roles, rules. So to consciously bring into your mind, what are we going to do as a couple around these issues is essential. Another way to say it, how do we make the covert, those things that are sort of under the table, how do we put those on top of the table in the light of day where we can make good decisions? Lots going on in that phase of life of the newly forming couple. What else is happening? People are coming to, in seed form, decide how they're going to make decisions together. And again, that tends to be an unconscious process. To make it conscious, I've known people over the years who consciously do this. As we're making this decision, is this more like, on a spectrum, more like a fist or a 0, or more like a 5? And if it's a 5 for that person, it's like a 1 for me, then let's kind of go your way with it. See? And then over the years, in an artistic marriage, people begin to know each other, to know that, you're a foodie, and so it's important to you which restaurant we go to. I'm not, so I don't care. So I kind of pull back on those kind of decisions. But when it comes to the landscaping, you know what I'm saying? So kind of being conscious about how we do that so that the decision doesn't fall one person's way or the other person's way, or we have to battle it out. Communication patterns. That's clearly something that begins to form in this phase of the relationship. To give conscious awareness to what's happening. I mean, there are those things that work in every marriage that research just tells us. When we're heading into a conflict or I need to make a complaint, start it off with something generous and loving and kind on the front end, and then get to my complaint, and then end it with something like that. That's universally helpful. Knowing how to paraphrase my spouse's point of view to see if I caught the message. What marriage wouldn't benefit from something like that? But there are those idiosyncrasies and those unique patterns of your spouse. My own research that I did for my dissertation when I interviewed happily married couples who were in the medical residency, I found out for those couples, they are good students of their own communication patterns. how do we go about this? In my line of work when you're in grad school, they call this meta communication. Meta, that Greek word meaning standing on top and looking down on something. Inviting your spouse to stand shoulder to shoulder with you and looking at, oh, we're doing that thing we do. Are you noticing it too? To be good students of how we go about things. When is a good time to engage in a conflict with my spouse? When's a better time to not engage and put a bookmark in it and get back to it? In my couples who are in that medical residency, when somebody's dead dog tired, it's probably not the time to tell them about a way they screwed up recently. See, so kind of knowing what those patterns are for us, real important. How will I divide labor in this family? You don't want that to be unconscious. You'd like that to be a thing that you talk about. When I'm doing couples counseling, this is my least favorite conversation because it's sort of boring to me, how we're going to divide up laundry, dishes, finances, that kind of thing. But it's essential because if you want to make somebody feel resentful, have them carrying too big of a load. Back in the 1980s, there was a book that was written that said The Second Shift. Back in those days, women were in the workforce, but they were being expected to do exactly what their mothers did that weren't in the workforce. So the book Second Shift said, these women are doing two jobs basically. They come home and they're working. I said back in those days, there may be some families still doing that. It's essential to sit down and talk through that because look what happens. Really good men and good women can fall into patterns that their mom and dad did in their marriages. In my family, the boys did the outdoor work. The girls did the indoor work. Can you just see how unfair that was? You know, you can mow a lawn once a week, but indoors there's dishes, there's laundry, there's cleaning house. So being conscious of that, so as I step into this multicultural experiment, we've got a nice equitable sharing of our labor resources. Another area to have a conversation about is the area of how do we become a sexual team with each other? What are those patterns that work for us? What are those patterns that don't work? This will be a bigger issue later on in the relationship as kids come along and there are pressures that take away the capacity to have intimate relationships, intimate experiences at will. But nonetheless, learning how to, these basic arts of being a sexual team. One would be something like when we're unevenly matched in our desire, how is it that I can give you a soft landing that not tonight, but it's not that I don't love you, it's just tonight it can't happen. How do I pull that off? How do I make non-demand requests for how we go about our business together? Making demands in the realm of sexuality kills it. So how do I make non-demand kind of invitations for how we're going to go about this? To balance that continuum of deep love and adventurousness and fun and newness. How are we going to do that, being a sexual team? Can we explicitly talk about that with each other? An awful lot of couples find that very hard to talk about, but it's an essential thing to talk about. One other thing I'd like to say about this forming a new couple phase. Whatever you can do to build a deep, rich, broad friendship system is important. I want you to think of it like this. In the forming stage of a couple, you are putting investments in a bank account in your friendship that you will be drawing on heavily in the next few years of your life. Think about that a second. When babies come and toddlers are in the world, you'll be glad for whatever you invested in that friendship system. So what are the things I'd like you to look at for that? To invest in the friendship system, what are the things that you can develop that you enjoy doing in common that just don't fall into one genre? When you ask a couple, what did you do like when you hung out as a new couple? And when they say, well, we'd go out to bars and drink, and that's about what we did. That's a shame. You want to, in this phase, build something broader. Did we hike together? Did we have a hobby we did together? Did we learn how to do puzzles on a quiet, cold night? What did we do? Let's set that up now so that we can draw on that later. Other things. How are you going to navigate that alone time and that couple time? Here's one. In my research, I found that my happily married couples, they invested the first fruits of their time in their spouse. And so, for instance, if I get 3 invitations to be on 3 softball teams, that's not going to be great for my marriage. Instead, when I've got that precious time off, I'm going to spend that time with my best friend, and we're going to do something great and fun. Something you want to ask yourself, who are the couples we want to hang out with whose values will be good values when we start having kids? Who will that be? So looking to build that friendship subsystem. All right, I'd like to give you an exercise that I'm drawing from graduate school. When you're teaching people who aspire to be marriage therapists, here's a technique you want to use in one of the first sessions of marital therapy with a troubled couple or a newly forming couple for that matter. You want to ask both of them to separately do this and then do it together. Who is your example of the best couple that you know? Who is that? Name them and come up with what are those attributes that qualify them to be called the most happily married, best couple that you would aspire to be like them. The next question is just like it. Who's the worst couple you know that when you're with them, it's like you can't get away fast enough? What are those attributes? Then compare notes with each other. And on this date or several dates, with your glass of wine, your cup of coffee, I'd like to see you then start brainstorming what are the goals that we have for the family we aspire to be, the couple we aspire to be. Once you get those goals clarified, try this on for a second. Here's the next part of the exercise. See if you can come up with some bumper stickers that you can keep in your head. Let me give you an example. When I learned in graduate school that in happily married couples, people are responsive to each other's requests, here's the bumper sticker I memorized and kept in the back of my head. If my child or wife makes a request of me, the answer will always be yes, provided that it's good for the family, it's good for that person as well, and I can do it. I'm going to say yes. That was a bumper sticker I kept in my head. Here's why bumper stickers are helpful. The brain does not think in paragraphs in a stressful situation. The brain thinks in short phrases. You never hear a fireman come into a classroom and teach children, well, here's what I want you to memorize. Repeat after me. Oxygen is what fires need to grow. Repeat it now. Oxygen is what you need. If you should catch fire, now say it, girls and boys. If you should go to the ground. Say it. You should stop, drop, and roll. No. Just says learn, stop, drop, and roll. You want that in your marriage. If you can memorize, once you've done this exercise, like here are the values we strive for. If you can get that down into bumper stickers in your head, then in the moment of that firefight in your family, you've got a little lexicon of those phrases you go to, and the brain can handle that, and your behavior will reflect it. Now, what I'd like to say is there are some of us who are more right brain and some more left brain. There's some debate about whether that's actually true, but there are some of us who are more like on the intuitive, creative side. For this exercise, you might close your eyes and picture when you have the relationship in the family you want, just see a day in the life of that. Like, what do you picture? And share your picture with each other. I see us, camping at the lake, and then from that you can glean out what are the specifics in terms of goals you'd like to go for. If you're more of that left brain person, where the way you go about it is you kind of think in syllogistic, like bullet points, that's fine. And even if you're different in those ways, just having that conversation and putting it together. So again, the name of the game is making the unconscious conscious, those things that are kind of underground, putting them on top of the table. And another way to think about it is to think in terms of being responsive rather than unresponsive to those requests and to my spouse. Because in successful families all across the lifespan, that kind of flexibility where you still have your North Star about where our values are. Oh, and did I mention, when the kids come, that'll blow all this up. And you will have to go back to the drawing board and restate and reform these things. And then when they become school-aged children, why, that'll blow it up again. Then you got to go back to the drawing board and ask them to help you put together the goals. Oh, and did I mention, when they're adolescents, it'll blow the whole thing up again. And then you'll take your kids and you, and hopefully there'll be a pattern where you can come up with those goals again. And did I mention, when you end up launching those young adults, that'll blow it up again, because then you'll be in the empty nest phase and you'll have to work out this, again, that flexible, but keeping our North Star in mind. All right, that's our conversation for this week. I look forward to seeing you next week as we continue this conversation about what builds relational resilience. I'll see you next week.